is just a doggone minute. And I say, basically saying, hold up, this is out of bounds. We got to do something different. And I talk about it on 10 TV, the African American Network, a local feel with a global reach.
We all have baggage from the past. Some of it goes back to our childhood. So, one of the exercises I have is that you're going to write two lists for each parent if you had both parents. And if both parents weren't in the home, you still can write about the absent parent. So, the first thing you do is with either parent, so I'm going to say father. With the father, you write down the things that they did well for you, the times that they made you feel secure and protected. You write down, did they keep their word? Were they consistent with you? All of those positive things that you can come up with. And then you also do the things that you felt were lacking. When did they let you down? What happened that you felt let down? And then you do the same thing for the other partner. But then in the journaling part, you're going to talk about, in my childhood, I missed out on, and these are just some examples: attention, encouragement, consistency. Also, the setting of boundaries may not have been there. Unconditional love may not have been there. And once you identify those things, then you write what you in your adult state can do to fill those gaps. So this also leads to being aware of what you're looking for in your partner. The thing about attention, when you have a partner, are you desiring attention? Some people, whether they're aware of it or not, will say negative attention is better than no attention. So you want to be aware, are you trying to fulfill a childhood need? Um, and maybe you really don't need all of that attention. It might be a signal that, hey, I need to just provide for myself that attention. Pay attention to me. It's a way of identifying some of the things that may not have happened in your childhood that you can work on in your adulthood. Another exercise, healing the heavy heart. And this is where you go into a thought process and you journal again. This is where you can write letters about the things that bother you. You don't send the letter off, but it's a way to identify some of the hurts from the past. When you do that, then you also do a forgiveness exercise. And the forgiveness exercise is where you verbally state, I forgive so and so, and I can see them as this now. I forgive so and so for what they did, and I forgive myself, because you may have had a reaction to what they did and you may not feel good about your reactions. You may have some anger, and it's okay to have that anger, but you can release that anger in reaction to what they did. The other thing you can do with that is write these hurts on a small piece of paper. I forgive Uncle so and so for his inappropriate behavior. I forgive myself for feeling guilty about his behavior. And then you take that piece of paper in a safe place and you can burn it. And as it burns, you visualize that this pain and hurt is evaporating out of your life. So that's three different exercises that you can do to heal from the past. Um, Writing and journaling, saying that you forgive these things and forgive yourself, and then doing something that demonstrates that this is going to evaporate from your life so that you have more space to bring love in. Along with, as I said earlier, getting rid of mementos, jewelry, gifts, getting rid of those things from some of the relationships so that you then have space for more to come in. So those were the exercises.
Charlene, jewelry, expensive jewelry.
Look, I had some expensive jewelry that was really hard for me to get. And the book I got it from, Calling in the One, Carolyn Woodard Taylor, Thomas, I'm sorry, Carolyn Woodard Thomas, her book, Calling in the One. And she says to like throw it away. And I'm like, I'm not throwing away this diamond necklace. But what I did do, I did a little prayer over it that whoever I gave this to was going to enjoy the beauty of the real gemstone and the real gold necklace. And I ended up giving it to my granddaughters and my niece so that they could have a nice piece of jewelry because they're young, they can't afford those things. So that's what I did with it. But I let it go, and it really did some clearing in my life by not holding on to that stuff.
So I think a lot of our makeup is due is a, has, our parents had a lot to do with our makeup. So I would like to see you and Carol do a role play on the mother father scenario,
Okay, before
because
we,
Carol has always talked highly about her parents and her upbringing, and I mean I can be involved in it with Charlene. So could we start doing a role play on that? So let's start with our fathers. So I felt secure with my father. I felt I could always go and talk to him. I was a daddy's girl, so and I could depend on him if I needed something. I hated to let him down. I remember one time he left his car for me to watch over. I wasn't supposed to let anybody use it. My brother wanted, he was just going down to the store. Well, my brother never came back and he wrecked his car.
oh wow,
I could have died that day. That I let my father down. I could have died that day. That's how much I love my father. Now where my disappointment came in, my father was an alcoholic. So there were a lot of things he couldn't do with us because he was always inebriated. He was one of those functional alcoholics. He could go to work during the day, but the minute he got home, that was it. That was it. He a good thing he was a happy drunk. You know, he would not chastise us. He would not call us out of our names. He wouldn't do that. Even to my mother, he would not do anything like that. So that would be my scenario.
Okay, so forgiving your father for the alcoholism, the alcoholic behavior. So you would write that out on a piece of paper, and then you would forgive yourself for feeling guilty about the disappointment. And then you would burn that paper and visualize it escaping out of your life, vaporizing out of your life.
Okay.
It's a freeing demonstration. So disappointment in his alcoholism, but freeing yourself of the guilt behind that particular situation.
Carol, you have anything to add?
yes, my father was a romantic, and he would sing to my mother and come in and grab her around the waist, and one of his favorite songs he was sing, "The Very Thought of You," that, and he would sing that to her, and I grew up with this kind of romantic atmosphere because it was always there in our home. My father was always touching my mother, saying sweet things to her, and making her giggle, and we as little kids watching this. So it set up that tone for the two older ones. We looked for a man that would be romantic with us. That was one of the first things that we had. Looks wasn't the thing, but if they could do the romance, that would be fine. And that was good. Now the flip side of that, because my father was so romantic and he was a tall, handsome man out in the public, he also was a hoe hopper because that's what he told me he was. And of course, being a young girl, I wasn't sure what a hoe hopper was. I thought it was somebody that hopped over a hoe. But I later found from my aunt that meant he was hopping on different women. So and then that was very disappointing because I thought being all these girls he had and my mother, that we were the apple of his eye. To think that he was be with somebody else, the way he treated my mother, set up a real suspicious behavior for me with men. So what I learned to do is I put that aside, like Charlene said, I put that aside and did not take that baggage to my relationship with my husband or any other man that come in. But I'm very aware all the time of these signals because my father had them there and I watch them. I have not gotten rid of what I've learned about what the signals are when you're doing it. But I have forgiven him for having other women in his life other than his 5 girls and my mom.
So with my father, he provided for us. I always say that he always made sure we had what we needed and most of what we wanted. He was a great provider as a father. Um, he was not always there because he was in the military. And so as a result of that, I had disappointment that he wasn't always there for me. And one of the times was we had a father-daughter banquet for the Girl Scouts, and my father was TDY and he couldn't go. And so a coach at our school filled in and was my father for the night, so to speak. But I had a disappointment with that. And so as a result, I felt that I would be deserted by men. So, I mean, he was doing his duty to the military, but I, as a young child, didn't understand that it was because of the military. I just knew he wasn't there when I needed him. And so one of the things that I did was to write out, what I could do to heal that wound. And one of them was to realize that my father was a hero. He, by not being when I needed him, he was there for the country because he was in the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and World War II. So he served in 3 wars and idolized that he made that choice to be in the military and that I was his daughter. I was the daughter of a hero. So that put him up on a pedestal and took away some of that hurt about him not being there for me. And that's how I dealt with that. And so now, as far as that goes to my relationships, I'm not always looking for someone to leave me. And if they have to, quote, leave me, it's usually because of a job situation or something like that. So I don't have all those dynamics in my relationships anymore.
That's good. That's good. Well, for me, I knew I wasn't an alcoholic. That would have never been in my life. Never been in my life. But someone that still loved me like my father did and always lifted me up, always proud of all of my accomplishments. That's what I knew I needed in my life.
Right.
So what about your mother? Let's start with you, Carol.
Oh, my mother was a typical homemaker. She didn't work. My father didn't allow her to work. And that set up a tone for me that I didn't want to be a homemaker. I didn't want to do it with my mother. I thought that it was boring. And she doted over my father and made life, I mean, everything centered around Jimmy Reed. And all of us girls did. And I learned from my mother that you cater to your man, even though daddy was not a true husband to her just being, well, he was an adulteress, but she never let that impact what she did for my father. She made sure his meals was already done, his clothes was clean, and when he came in, the house was the way he wanted. She just did all those things for him. And I thought, why are you doing that? Well, he's out running around with somebody else, and she never addressed that. So I was pretty angry with her for not standing up to my father and telling him, I'm not gonna do this. So I grew up saying, I'm never accepting any of that crap from any man. I'm going to be able to take care of myself and be able to feed myself, and I'm not going to be able to stay home. I'm going to make sure I have a job and get my own money. But I later found out from my mother, it wasn't about the money or anything else. She loved my daddy, and she wanted us to have a nice, peaceful home, and she didn't see any reason to cause this kind of fighting and stuff about something that was not our business. So I guess she took care of it in another way. So I learned that about my mother, and I've learned to respect her for what she did. And it had helped me in my own marriage that I didn't do those things with my husband. I mean, I've always prepared for him and did the things I was supposed to do, regardless of what he did. He was the head of the household. His meals were done. His house was clean. And even though I was a working wife, I made sure I did it. So I thank my mother for that. And I'm no longer angry with her thinking that she was a doormat, because that's what I thought she was. And and she's really a wonderful woman. And she's 99 years old right now, and still great. So I adore her.
My mother worked. She went back to school after she had us. So we were young children watching her go to school. So she influenced me that way about getting an education, to take care of yourself. So she didn't know what it was to be overweight. And I was always kind of chubby as a child. And so she would make comments about me and my size. And so that was hurtful. And I did go through the process. There was one statement that she made that really affected me. I found out that our subconscious mind will take on and do things to protect you.
Yeah.
But sometimes that protection is not positive protection. So what the comment was that you keep going to the refrigerator, one day you're going to be big as a house.
Yeah.
My subconscious heard big as a house. So my eating habits became so I could be big as a house.
Yeah.
And so when I realized that connection, that's when I started losing weight and trying to get down to a normal size. And I forgave her for that. And I forgave myself for taking on that, that behavior, that habit, and realized that we all have to eat, but there's a healthy way to eat. And even though the comment affected me the way it was, she really was trying to be helpful. She didn't want me to be overweight. And so she was coming from a good place, but I had to process that. And so as far as that whole thing that I just said, accepting me as I am, that kind of comes out of that, whether I'm big or little or whatever my size is or whatever I look like, accept me as I am. And that's where that comes from. So in my relationships now, I want someone that can accept me as I am, not so much about the physical part of me, but more about my brain and my values and my accomplishments.
So my mother was the same. She worked. My mother was a nurse. Um, Always had a house that was spick and clean through uh, Betty, Diane, and Kennedy. That's one thing she taught us. She taught us how to clean. But ironically, she would not teach us. She never taught us how to wash the clothes, and she never taught us to cook. We could. She was a great. Both my parents were great cooks, but neither one of them would teach us those two life skills. She appearance was also very important to her as well. If we went to her job, we better be as clean as a whistle when we walk through those doors, and where everyone would say, "Oh, those are." My mom, they addressed her as Mac. Those are Mac's children. We could tell just by the way they're dressed. On the flip side, my mother was always mean to my father, always mean, and but he would never say anything bad about her. He would always have his on even keel with her. And I can remember one day asking him, "Daddy, why is mama always mean to you?" And he just said, "Don't worry about it, sugar. Everything's okay." So that was my experience with her, and it taught me to try to be on like more like my dad, to be on an even keel. Now, what have I always been? No, but that always stuck in my mind that um, if you keep who you are true to yourself, and even though someone is treating you bad, doesn't mean you have to reciprocate and treat them bad.
That is so important, what we shared about our parents and those tapes, because they're definitely going to show up in your relationship.
Yeah.
And being aware of them, you know how to put them aside or to let them evaporate out of your life, because it will impact on your relationships with your spouse. If I had taken on the suspicious spouse all the time with my husband, I mean, my marriage would have been horrible. But that trust came because I learned there's a difference in your relationship while accepting your partner for who they happen to be. Even though I would not accept my husband running around on me like my mother did, but I learned to accept other things about him and sit down and told him my need for that fidelity, not because of the law of God, but because my own background and how that would impact on our relationship. And he understood that.
Right. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to bring that out and let's share some of the personal experiences we had as children is because, sometimes our audience thinks since they see us here, they see we have good careers, that we didn't have any issues growing up. Yes, we all do. Just because what you see on the outside is bright and dandy, that's not our reality and what we dealt with growing up from a child to the age that we are right now. So we all have some kind of baggage one way or another. It's just how you learn how to cope and release that baggage. Charlene, did you have some additional techniques for us?
Yes. So as far as making space in your heart, there's a couple of things there. One is having the attitude of gratitude. I talked about it last time. You can do journaling or you can do little post-it notes, but every morning when you wake up, something that you're grateful for. And sometimes you may just have to say, hey, I'm grateful I woke up, or I'm grateful the sun is shining. But there are a lot of things, and throughout the day, I would make little notes and be grateful for the smallest things. Of course, I'm grateful for the big things, but you would be surprised when you get into that habit of having the attitude of gratitude, how those small things, being grateful for that can make a difference. So journaling the things that you're grateful for or doing the little post-it notes. I like the post-it notes because I started out with so many on my wall in a certain place in my bedroom, and over time it grew. So I started making patterns with it, and it actually kind of became a piece of artwork over time. So that's one thing. And the other one about opening your heart, you really have to have a visualization of what that is. We, of course, have that regular shape of what a heart is. How do they do it? I can never get, there we go. The little heart, anyway, have a little heart. So you visualize doors in that heart and they open up. And it's called the art of receiving, because we can give love, but we can't always receive it. So you visualize those little doors in your heart opening up. And then you say this little mantra: I open my heart to give love so that I may receive love. And you visualize when you get up in the morning, before you even get out the bed, I give love, and then you visualize so that I can receive love. And you hold yourself. That small exercise on a daily basis will make you feel better about you, and it will open your heart for love. One of the things that I found in these exercises I'm talking about is that I had not loved myself, and not loving myself created some pretty bad relationships. Um, I am a survivor of a very violent relationship, and I stayed too long. And part of the reason I stayed too long is because I didn't love myself. I didn't feel worthy. Um, that was many years ago, but now I am worthy. I do love myself, and I am capable of loving. I've had different relationships, and when I end a relationship, I don't blame me 100%, which is something I used to do. I share in the success of that relationship or the relationship not working out so well. And I use each one as a lesson. So as I learn about love and opening my heart, more love comes in. I receive more love, which is a wonderful thing. But in that process, I'm able to give more love and to forgive easier. It's hard to forgive, but when you focus on that attitude of gratitude, you open your heart, and every morning you're loving yourself, you will see that your relationships will change, the quality of them will change. And we're going to talk about some of those things in the next two episodes. Communication is key. Loving yourself, what does that mean? Loving yourself. I thought I loved myself, but I have found out that there were some things I needed to resolve to really love me. And that has improved the quality of life and the quality of my relationships, and not just my love relationship with my partner, but with my family members, with my friends, all of that. So, doing those exercises really do help to open your heart so that you receive love in return.
Charlene, may I add something to that that I think is very important? Um, Charlene's talking about loving herself, and when you're doing that, I can tell you there's not a time I talk to Charlene on the phone and we're saying goodbye that she doesn't say, I love you. And this is our friendship, it's a wonderful feeling. And to make sure I say that I love you too. People don't do that enough, but when you start doing it, it becomes such a habit and it feels so good. Every time I hang up from talking to her, it's a warm, loving feeling, regardless of what our conversation, whether it was a very high reorganizing about our behavior, but it ends in that love. And that is so important. And I can tell you, I do love you, Charlene. And our relationship has been an up and down hill one that has grown to tremendous love and respect. So I love you. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. I love you too. Thank you. And Betty, you know I love you too. I said, Betty, you know I love you too. You're my sis.
All right, all right. And I love both of my sisters. Charlene, as you were talking about your notes, it reminded me of my daughter. She used to do that in high school. I go in her room and she'd have all these post-it notes with all these positive affirmations on them. And I said, Russia, where did all these come from? She said, oh, it's just something, to help me so I could um, keep my morale up. I think some of it had to do with the school she attended at that time, where there were few minorities in the school, but they really helped her. And I don't remember where I had heard this. Could have been on Oprah. I'm not sure, but it always stuck in my mind, and I always um, talked to my children about it, especially when they were young. And I told them um, that they were somebody. I told them they needed to say to themselves, I am somebody and I will make a difference in this world. And I over and over and over again, just that positive affirmation, whether you're young or you're old, sometimes you have to tell yourself that. Sometimes I have to tell myself that and remind myself that. But even just saying those positive affirmations to yourself can make your day go from a bad day to a good day.
And this is something that's important, especially in our community with the African American community and other people of color too, but particularly our community, is taking the time to think positive about ourselves, to love ourselves. And these few simple things that we're talking about, people may think, oh, that's just silly, it won't make a difference. Yes, it will make a difference. It will make a difference in your mental health. When you love yourself and you feel worthy, that goes a long way with depression, with people that are feeling like they want to commit suicide, with anxiety, with, I'm trying to think, there's so many different things with the mental health aspect. But when you make that small effort, the attitude of gratitude and loving yourself and positive affirmations about you, about yourself, they make a difference, a big difference.
And they help God to come into your life and help you to receive Him into your life as well. So I want to make sure we keep God at the forefront and realize
Yes.
that we could not have half or be half as good as we are. We couldn't be where we are without Him. But if we keep all that ash and trash, He can't get in. So we have to release ourselves so He can come into our lives. and do even bigger and greater things in it. Did you have some additional, Charlene?
Yes, that's a good point you make, because when you have a holistic approach, we talked about physical, emotional, you have the spiritual also. You also have family and financial and all of these other things, but spiritual, believing in a higher power. Alcoholics Anonymous talks about having a higher power. People have different religious beliefs, but when you believe in a creator, a higher power, for me, that's God, Jesus Christ, as my savior. But when you have that belief in a higher power, then you begin to learn humility and you begin to learn worthiness. Glad that you mentioned the spiritual aspects, very important. Carol.
Betty, I want to just add to, when I was a young woman going off to college, one of the things, we had this Black movement going on. And when you said this about I'm somebody, Jesse Jackson used to say that I'm somebody and Black is beautiful. That was something that resonated across our country.
Yeah.
That started young Black women, especially, know that they were beautiful, because that was not said to them. If you didn't have long silky hair and everything else, then you were not beautiful. So that started a whole movement about Black being beautiful and things, and accepting your wide nose, thick lips, and whatever, and your heavy butt and all of those things, that knowing that that's beautiful. And we know that it's really beautiful because people are getting injections in their butts now to make them look like ours. So, and they're getting injections in their lips. So, look at how that has changed.
Yeah.
And that was the message that was given to us by our leaders who were making a movement. So, and my father used to always say, I am the greatest. He used to tell us that all the time. And I am a man. And he would beat his chest like a gorilla, and we would look at him and think he was nuts. But we understood after we grew up that was important for him to do those affirmations, because he had to go out in a world that to minimize him as a boy. And therefore he had to make sure he did those affirmations to himself. And we felt that he walked on water, because we believed, yes, he was the greatest, and he was definitely a man. And so those kind of messages were there. And I think they're important for you to do that. So definitely, Charlene, love yourself and make those affirmations.
Two quick stories about that. This is really an American perspective that, it's beginning to turn around, that we are reinforcing our beauty with our youth and ourselves and all of that. But I've been a world traveler, and growing up with the blonde blue eyes is what's beautiful. I was in Tunisia. And in Tunisia, they love dark-skinned, heavy women. And my sister, as we would go do the different things, she would say, these guys sure are looking at you a lot, because I was blind to it. I wasn't even aware they were watching me. And until one day I was walking down this street, and there was a guy on a ladder. I think he was painting or something like that, but he was on a ladder, and I kind of noticed that he was watching me, but he watched me so hard that he fell off the ladder. And I was like, what? Okay. And then being in Greece, again, it's a country that loves dark-skinned women and thick women. And so I was there with my sister and a friend named Deborah, and we were getting ready to cross the street, and the traffic was really, really heavy. And we were waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally, this guy came out, and he stopped the traffic, and he pointed at the three of us and did like this, like, please go by. And as we were walking by, he said, my queens. And we were like, woo! But this was in Greece. And when we went into the little stores in Greece, other people would be in there, but the men in there would come to us and they would offer us fruit. And we were like, hey, what is this thing? But in Greece, and they have some gorgeous men in Greece. They're beautiful. But they appreciated us as dark-skinned women. I had not experienced that in the United States, And it helped me realize that this is an American perspective, that we are appreciated in other parts of the world. And so that's when I started to realize that I am beautiful, and that I am sexy, and I am worthy, and I love myself. And so getting out in the world, truly, literally getting out in the world, showed me that this is just one perspective. There are places that do appreciate us.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a great experience.
I have to put Tunisia on my list of places to go.
Girl, they're in Greece, let me tell you.
I've been to Greece. I didn't experience that in Greece, but I've been to Tunisia. Carol, did you have anything to add?
No, I'm like Charlene. I experienced some of those things while living overseas too, and it was wonderful to be reinforced that that I was a tall, big woman, and that men enjoyed me. And the Germans, apparently, the German men seem to have really doted over me, and that's where I was living. So that was always a reinforcement. And I tried to make sure I pat myself on the back and say, hey, you're all right, and go on. And I got that reinforcement from my husband all the time too, as well. But I think that what we are talking about preparing yourself from head to toe, inside and out, is very important. And when you're getting ready to start bringing somebody else in your life, so you need to make that preparation before you step out there. I learned a lot, Charlene. I'm going to take care of down some of those pictures.
All right. Yay.
Charlene, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out.
Okay, well, tonight was our first episode in a series of 3 on seniors, dating, relationships, and love. Tonight was preparing for love. Our next one is as you get into a relationship, how to build and develop relationships. And then our third one will be the long-term commitment, and what if it doesn't quite work out? How do you become resilient from that, rebound, and get into love again? And so we thank you for listening to us, and again, on the African American Network that has the local feel with a global reach. Thank you.
Tell me what's the vibe.